I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the 2024 season for the Jacksonville Jaguars was really bad. Watching them play every Sunday was like if someone asked you, hey, do you want someone to pour acid in your eyes while spraying you with pepper spray for 3 hours straight? And even worse than watching the Jaguars play on television in 2024 was paying money to see them play. If you had season tickets to watch the Jaguars play their home games, God bless you, because man, that season sucked. Across the 7 games that the Jaguars played in Jacksonville, they went just 2-5, and they ended the season with an abysmal 4-13 record that left them out of the playoff hunt by Halloween, especially after an 0-4 start through their first 4 games. In other words, it was not fun. And if you were a season ticket holder, I'm pretty sure that you felt ripped off. I'm paying all this money to watch this team suck week after week? I'm spending my hard-earned cash on this team, and it's November, and we're already out of the playoff hunt, and I still have these tickets, and there's nothing I can do about it? I want a refund. I want my money back. This season did not go how I thought it would, and I wouldn't have bought these season tickets if I knew that the team would stink this much and the games I bought tickets for didn't matter. So I want to return them. If you've ever had season tickets to any team, you know that this is not how this works at all. Buying season tickets to a team is like a lottery ticket. If they're good, you get playoff tickets at face value, priority for events, and a ton of other perks and special merchandise. If they're bad, well, that's too bad. Every team can't be a winner, and the idea of refunding season tickets if a team is bad is a crazy idea that would make a lot of teams highly unprofitable. However, I bring that hypothetical scenario up because that's what happened in 1975 with this team right here, the New Orleans Saints. At least, that's what almost happened. Because after the Saints got off to yet another bad start in 1975, with this one somehow being worse than all the other ones, one ABC reporter said that the Saints were issuing refunds for season ticket holders. And to say that all hell broke loose would be putting it lightly. As for whether the claim by this reporter was true, well, you'll see in just a bit. Because this is the story behind the controversy between the New Orleans Saints and ABC, and one of the craziest ticketing controversies in the history of the NFL that you've never heard of that deserves a deep dive half a century later. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one. So if you like that sort of stuff and want to join this community of sports lovers, then this is the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and with that in mind, let's talk about when the Saints went marching in and the fans wanted to march out. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and the firestorm that it caused, we need some context to understand how the season was going for the Saints and how they were playing on the field. No one had any expectations for the Saints entering the 1975 season, and I think that's the understatement of the century. Every other team in NFL history, by this point in time, had found at least some sliver of hope at some point in franchise history, even if it was a quasi-mediocre season where they were in the running until December. Even the franchises that had never made the playoffs by this point had a season or two where they were average and were watchable. The Saints had not had that, as entering 1975, they had never finished the season better than 5-9, and had won just 30 games in 8 seasons out of a possible 112, meaning that about 3 out of every 4 times the Saints took the field, they were going to lose. And after a 5-9 season where they ended it losing 5 of their final 7 games and finished with the 3rd worst offense in football, and after bringing everyone back for 1975, making no changes, including awful head coach John North and awful general manager Richard Gordon, who, for those who don't know, had literally no football experience before becoming the GM and was brought onto the role because he was an astronaut and building a football team couldn't be as hard as going to space. And no, I am not making that up. The Saints were once again expected to be pretty bad. But oh man, I don't think people knew how bad the bottom could fall out. Over the first 2 weeks of the season, as in the 2 games you've been watching for the last minute or two, it became very apparent that this team was not going to be competing, and this would be another season of being atrocious in every sense of the word. To be fair, their first 2 games were against Washington and Cincinnati, 2 of the best teams in the NFL, and 2 teams expected to do a lot during that 1975 campaign. However, it's not that the Saints went 0-2, although that was pretty bad by itself, seeing as no team since the merger at that point had ever made the playoffs following an 0-2 start. It's that they didn't even look the slightest bit competitive, and looked like they were playing a completely different sport. They looked like a peewee football team. The Saints lost their first game to Washington 41-3, then lost their next game at home to Cincinnati 21-0. Over the first 2 weeks of the season, the Saints had the worst point differential in the NFL, having been outscored by 59 points while scoring a league-worst 3 points. For some perspective, every other team in the league had scored double digits. To give you an idea of how bad they were to start the year off over the first 2 weeks, in the National Football League, the last team to go 0-2, score 3 points or less, and allow at least 60 points over their first 2 games was the Philadelphia Eagles in 1933. Yes, the Saints were doing things that hadn't been done since 1933, and prior to the Eagles, the last team to do it was the Louisville Colonels in 1926. The last time any team started off as poorly as the Saints did, Ritz crackers were not a thing, Disney had produced 0 feature-length animated films, Babe Ruth was still playing baseball, there had never been an NCAA tournament for college basketball, and the leader of Germany was Paul von Hindenburg. In other words, it was a while ago. That's how bad New Orleans was. 2 weeks into the season, and it was over. Put a fork in them. Spoiler alert, as you're about to tell from the rest of these lowlights, it's not going to get any better on the field. Fortunately for Saints fans, though, if they were upset about the way the team was playing and they didn't want to stomach it anymore, there was a way out. Because if you had season tickets and you wanted to return them because of how poor the team was playing, you absolutely could. The ABC affiliate for New Orleans, WVUE, which is a Fox affiliate today, had a sportscaster by the name of Buddy Diliberto, otherwise known as Buddy D. If you're a New Orleans sports fan, or remember watching TV and the news in the area anytime from the 1970s to the 1990s, you definitely know who this guy is, because he's somewhat of a local legend down there. Anyways, Buddy D put out a report on Wednesday, October 1st, just a few days after that awful 21-0 loss to Cincinnati, that he heard that fans were getting refunds due to the team's poor play. The Saints were issuing refunds because of how bad they looked. And if you wanted to get a refund on your season tickets, all you had to do was go down to the stadium or call the phone lines, and you'd be able to do it, no questions asked. Seems like a crazy thing to do for any team to just issue refunds with 6 home games to go in the season. And it's a heck of a scoop by Buddy D, but that's exactly what was happening. So on October 2nd, with tons of fans now armed with this knowledge, they went down to the Superdome and clogged up the phone lines, trying to get their money back so they didn't have to watch their godforsaken football team anymore. And the Saints? Yeah, the Saints had no idea what the fans were talking about. Because as it turns out, that report by Buddy D, it was completely made up. It was not even remotely true. The Saints had given out some refunds over the previous few days, but that was because that game against the Bengals was their first game at the Superdome, and some of the season ticket holders who moved over from Tulane Stadium to the Superdome did not like where their seats were, and felt that they were in a poor location, and wanted to either be moved or return the seats. Keep in mind that Tulane Stadium had more seats than the Superdome, so some fans were going to get screwed in the move, as you've probably seen when teams move from stadium to stadium. The 2 stadiums were not even close to the same configuration in terms of how many seats were by the 50 and how many were in the end zones. But in terms of poor play, Absolutely positively not. The report by Buddy D was false. And now, the Saints were having to pay the price for Buddy D's inaccurate reporting. The Saints had to answer phone calls all throughout the week and deal with angry people at the ticket booth all week, thinking that they could get a refund because they heard it on the news. Buddy D had put the Saints in a no-win situation here. Now, every fan who comes up to request a refund had to be told they couldn't get one, which left the fans thinking that the Saints either went back on their word and lied to everyone, or left fans thinking that the Saints truly believed that their product was acceptable. But the Saints did as much damage control as possible, despite the fact that this was not their fault, and the fact that the fans were livid, with one fan saying, "I want a refund. I don't want to watch those bums anymore." As Harry Holmes, the vice president for the Saints, said on this, "We did not put out any such announcement. It is strictly Buddy Diliberto's doing. Short, sweet, and right to the point. Don't blame us for this. This came entirely from a made-up report from Buddy D." Eventually, the Saints put out a longer statement, which reiterated the fact that you could not get refunds on season tickets, as clearly stated on every ticket and is clearly made when you purchase a ticket. As the Saints later said, "It is not now, nor has it ever been, the policy of the New Orleans Saints to offer general refunds on season tickets." Some confusion may have arisen about this policy due to special problems which came up when the Saints moved from Tulane Stadium to the Superdome. When this move was made, a number of complaints were received concerning various seating locations. In response to these complaints, the Saints changed seat locations for over 1,000 fans. In a few instances, fans could not be satisfied with other available seat locations. In these cases, refunds were made. The New Orleans Saints policy against general refunds is clearly stated on the front of each ticket issued by the New Orleans Saints. In other words, you're not getting your money back. Buddy D's story was a lie. The handful of refunds, if you even bothered to do 2 seconds of research before you went on the air, had to do with the seats themselves and not the team's foreplay. You can't just request a refund for a game that you went to after it already happened. That's not how it works, that's not how it ever worked, and that's not how it will ever work in the future. Our policy has always been the way it is, and it's the same policy around the NFL and all sports for that matter. And you were lied to by an ABC reporter who didn't do his job properly. End of story. And I'm sure that news didn't help Saints fans out, even though the Saints were 100% in the right, and the frustration of the Saints fans was 100% understandable. The Saints would finish that season, their first in the Superdome, with a 2-12 record, the worst record in the NFL, switching coaches midway through the year and finishing with the worst offense in football, with the offense scoring under 12 points per game. The Saints did win some games at the Superdome. They won their Week 4 game against the Packers by a final score of 20-19, and they defeated their biggest rival, the Atlanta Falcons, and won that game 23-7 in the Superdome a few weeks later. But across the final 4 games of the Superdome to close the season out, they went 0-4 and got outscored 92-37, scoring 7 points or less in 3 of those games and losing 3 of the 4 by multiple possessions, including a 35-point drubbing to end the season at the hands of the Chicago Bears, and a game against the Minnesota Vikings where the Saints had negative passing yards, literally finishing the game with -7 yards of offense through the air and just 60 yards total. If you're watching this video right now, congratulations. You had more passing yards that day against the Vikings than the Saints did. If you had tickets to watch the Saints play during those games, my condolences. As for Buddy D, the man who sparked this controversy in the first place with his shoddy reporting, he kept his job but learned from his mistake, because fortunately for Buddy, this was the last time he'd ever be involved in any sort of controversy regarding getting the facts wrong and just blatantly spreading misinformation over the air to the football fans in New Orleans. You gotta be kidding me. You're actually kidding me. I don't even know what to say anymore. I really don't. This might be a future video topic, but yeah. If you remember that controversy from Super Bowl 20 about a decade later, it's the same freaking guy. If you were wondering at the start of this video, Hey, wait a second, that name sounds familiar, but I didn't live in New Orleans. Yeah, that's probably why. It's the same freaking guy. Some things never change. The best advice I can give to any fan who wants to buy season tickets is that if you're going into this expecting the team to be good every single season and expecting that you'll be able to get a refund if the team doesn't perform to your expectations, then don't get them, because that's not how this works. I'm a season ticket holder for the Arizona Diamondbacks. If I could just get a refund for every game if they lost, and my experience wasn't a 10 out of 10 because of that, that would be insane. I'd be doing that a lot. I can't blame the fans for wanting refunds, especially seeing as they heard it on the news, thought they could trust the news, and took action as a result. I also can't blame the Saints for not following through on their promise, since they never made the promise, and since the precedent that would set going forward would be insane. Also, it would lose them a ton of money. This is why you always need to get the facts right and get everything straightened out before you report it as factual news over the air, because it can cause absolute chaos if your words are false. Case in point, what happened in 1975, when thanks to a false report outside the Superdome, fans formed what can only be described as a ticket picket. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.